Welcome to the show. And our today's guest is a super dad. He's dating his wife and has a contagious personality. He's on a mission to positively impact 1 million role models around the world and to lead a functionally fit life through education, encouragement, and community. He's an award-winning digital thought leader, author, distinguished Toastmaster, and keynote speaker, former partner and chief operating officer of a multi-million dollar retail company, and a shout-out lifestyle mentor and executive performance coach. And he's none other than Dai Manuel, and we welcome to the show. Welcome him to the show. So how do you feel about being on the show?
It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I always love connecting with like-minded individuals. So thank you for the opportunity to connect and have a conversation today.
Yeah, amazing. So how has your day been so far?
Day's been great. Got up nice and early, did some meditation, some stretching, went for a walk, had a coffee. I'm drinking my smoothie right now. It's a nice, easy Tuesday morning. So it's going pretty good so far.
Amazing. So you're doing really well then. So tell us about your journey. So like, how did everything got started and how did you reach the point you're at right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, I guess it depends what part you're referring to. I mean, my journey is, I've been on this planet 44 years. So as you can imagine, I've had a few journeys in between those from the time I was born to now. So is there a particular area you'd like me to focus in on?
You can say your entrepreneurial journey. That will be great.
Sorry, what was that?
Entrepreneurial journey. So like as an
entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. Well, from I guess from my late teens, I've really enjoyed responsibility. Let's just say that, like I enjoy personal as well as professional development. And I always want to challenge myself. So I like growth, right? I like to see progress. And I started as a personal trainer while I was going to school. And that was sort of my first entrepreneurial experience, sort of working for myself. Obviously, my roots as a paper boy were back in my younger days. And that sort of progressed as I found myself being attracted to certain types of roles in various organizations as I was finishing my schooling, my university. And I just always loved the idea of building something for myself. And that idea that comes with entrepreneurship, at least I always envisioned it, at least when I was younger, that it was a freedom lifestyle. I get control of my schedule. And what I realized was as I got more involved in it and creating my own business and then ultimately scaling the businesses, I realized that very often it's a 24/7 job. Or as a mentor of mine used to say, when you're an entrepreneur working for yourself, you only work half-time. And I used to always wonder, what do you mean half-time? And they'd say, well, either the first 12 hours or the last 12 hours of the day. And I always sort of laughed at that. But I did gravitate to that kind of role and the roles that didn't have a ceiling. The potential was whatever I wanted to make of it. And that attracted me. I felt I wasn't limited. And after years and years of just working for myself or working within an organization, but as a partner, I always felt I had ownership. But even for those that are listening, if you're not an entrepreneur, but I believe that we all have entrepreneurial qualities, especially when it comes to just living our best life. And the way I live life is very similar to how I do business. I don't see a separation between the two because the two complement one another greatly. And obviously just things have transitioned going to more of a laptop lifestyle, especially 6 years ago when I left a brick and mortar company that I was a partner in of 17 years. And that opened up a whole nother world and journey for myself as my family and I traveled the world and spent 2.5 years in Bali, Indonesia as a home base before returning to Canada before COVID. And so I serve many clients around the world, just through my internet connection, like many of us. And then as a speaker, it's been interesting this past year with COVID and speaking online at events online versus in person, like I was used to. And so I think all of us are shifting the way we do business, especially over this last year. And so that's sort of a 10,000 foot view of a career that spanned 25, almost 26 years of working for myself.
Really interesting. Like that's an amazing story. That said, so like, how many businesses have you grown?
I don't know, 4, 5, 6. I guess 6. Yeah, directly or indirectly. Like some of them were not. Like now, I actually support a lot of other people more as a consultant. I come in and I help them optimize their businesses, their operations, systems, flows, as well as help them scale. So it's kind of interesting. I may not be the owner of those existing companies I'm being contracted to come and support and help, but I always treat it like my own. And I think that's been just something that I've always considered. So even when I'm working with some of my clients on the business development side of things, I always just treat it like it is my business. And but my own personal businesses, a number of them, and I still operate a number of them. But I'm very efficient with systems and operations, so I can operate my businesses on minimal time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So who would you say like were the 3 biggest influencers in your life?
There's either direct or indirect. I have to give it to my parents. They had a wonderful work ethic, and both were entrepreneurial. My father started his own practice, before I was born, and always worked for himself, building his own veterinary practice. And so watching and growing up around that, he worked a lot, but he loved it. He just loved it. He felt very fulfilled by his work. And so it was really neat to see that. Obviously, there were some negatives, some imbalance as it relates to lifestyle and health versus work. And that was something else that I observed and I learned by watching. And then my mom as well, just a wonderful woman, full of energy, who's always redefining her passions and exploring new interests. And I really love that. And it really got me excited for growth. As I said earlier, this personal and professional growth. My mom's always been a student of life. And I admire that. And it definitely rubbed off on me. And I find I've got a bit of my mom and my dad in me. So those are some of my earliest role models and influences. And obviously, as I've worked over the ages, and it's funny, ages, as I feel 2.5 decades into my work and career life, there's been a lot of indirect mentors, just because I read a lot. I watch a lot of or listen to a lot of content from other leaders in other industries. And so I find that I learn from them indirectly. And I think that's the cool thing. A lot of people think, well, I need to have a role model in my life. Well, we're surrounded by role models. Watch a great TED Talk, read a wonderful book, have an interesting conversation, listen to a great podcast. These are all great ways to grow personally and professionally as we really control the influences on our minds and our spirits and our bodies by controlling what we allow in to our minds and especially into our lives, right? So, and then when I got into business for myself, my first business partner, he was also a mentor of mine. And I definitely learned a lot from him over the span of the career that we worked together. So those are some of the most memorable ones for me, but there's been lots of influences that have been very positive in my life.
Yeah, really interesting. Now, like as you said, like one thing though, like I want to mention here, like you are a newly, like recently you became a TED speaker, TED Talks. Yeah. So how do you feel about that?
That was amazing. It's been on my vision board for 7, almost 8 years, but because of my travel schedule and just my limited ability to commit to doing a talk, I just hadn't found the time or the energy to commit to the TED process. It's a very lengthy process where, it was 7 months from the time that I was invited to apply to the day that I actually gave the talk, 7 months. So you can imagine lots of practice, lots of working with coaches, lots of editing and refining of the message. So it was a lot of work, but very fulfilling. It's been something I've wanted to do for a very long time. So yeah, a couple of weeks ago, being able to check that off my live list was a very exciting and fulfilling day.
Okay. So like being a TED Talk speaker, like also on my, you can say checklist.
Yes, great. I love it. I love it. I think everybody's got a TED Talk in them, you know?
Yeah. Let's see how many years it takes for me.
Chip away at it, man. That's all you got to do. You just got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So one thing also, like in your profile that it said like 5 Fs, you mentioned about 5 Fs. So what is 5 Fs for you and why is it important to you?
Yeah. Well, one is alliteration. We have an ability to remember things, when we use a lot of the same letters. So I use 5 Fs really to help people frame up my general idea of how I sort of prioritize things in my own life. And I find that it actually is a process that a lot of other people find very familiar. And when I say familiar, it's like when I explain this to you, it'll probably make a lot of sense. And those that are listening or watching this are probably thinking, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do the same thing in my life, but maybe you haven't considered it in this sort of a framework. And what I mean by that is I like to use, you could call it an analogy or more of a metaphor. But if you think about your life is like a house. All right. So you think about a house, you got 4 walls, a roof, and usually a foundation it's built on. That's our typical idea. When you're a kid and you're drawing a picture of a house, you got a little roof, a couple walls, and then we can put the lawn or the grass or whatever. So just take that visual. You think of a house, you've got 4 walls or 4 pillars that the roof sits on top of. Well, I like to think about my life as a house. I have a foundation of health. But then there's the 4 pillars in the roof, and they each are defined by an F: fitness, family, faith, finances, with an overarching roof of fun. So those are the 5 Fs. And what I mean by this is those are things that I prioritize in my life. Some of my core values align with those. So like family is a priority. When my family is not being prioritized in my life, where I find I'm not spending or not connecting with family on a regular basis, that wall gets a little weaker. It infects the integrity of the whole house, right? Like we get sometimes a storm comes in and it might knock down a wall. Well, when we have that knockdown, the integrity of our life is affected in a negative way. So we have to always be reinforcing the walls, working on the uptake of that house to make it so it's resilient against the storms or the outside influences. And so that's sort of how I prioritize. Fitness is really important to me because it helps that foundation of health. Finances, very important, being financially responsible. We live in a global economy. Unfortunately, I wish we could all work on a barter system and just trade services, but that doesn't work so much anymore. So we need to be financially responsible so we can look after basic needs. You think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We want to be safe. We want a roof over our head, food in our belly, maybe insurance. There's some basic necessities. And if you cannot be financially responsible to be able to provide yourself with that safety, it's really hard to build a life that provides you with ultimate happiness if you're unable to provide yourself with the basic necessities in life. So that's where the finances come in. So family, fitness, faith. Faith, it's non-denominational. For some people, it's denominational. Some people are more secular. They might have a Christian background or an Islamic background, whatever. That's fine. I don't like to define it by any one religion. So when I say faith, I'm thinking about my faith in humanity and really my purpose in life. And what I like to think is when I leave this planet, whenever that happens, I want to leave it better than when I got here. So that's sort of my idea of faith. And then the roof of fun. If you're not smiling every day, you're probably not doing it right. So there's opportunity to get better. And that's that idea of being able to be liked, to be happy, to be connected with what we do. And so that's the idea of the 5S. It just gives you a simple framework to sort of prioritize things in your life that align with your values. Now, I always invite people, those are my S. They might work for you, might be very similar, but just define your own house. What are some of your core values? And if you envision your own house, what does that look like? And I think everybody's foundation should be health. Because when you don't have health, whatever you're trying to build on top, whatever life, whatever business you want to build, it's going to be rocky. You're going to be susceptible to outside influences like an earthquake, right? Where it could be like a COVID, where all of a sudden, if you don't have health, you could be affected by those external forces. And we already know, we've seen it affect people very negatively, right? If they don't have health in a good place, that could be mental health, it could be physical health, spiritual health, financial health. But we need a solid foundation of health, because without that, you're on uncertain territory. The first big wave comes in, it can knock that house over, and then you're sort of left thinking, I got to rebuild. And so that's sort of the framework that I use with the 5S.
Okay. So one question that came to my mind is how do you define a good health? What is a good health to you?
Well, I think it is highly subjective, right? We each know our own bodies and minds and spirits better than anybody else can know for us. So we have to have that self-accountability and that self-awareness to qualify, or in some cases, quantify what health or healthy means to us. But, if I was going to generalize it a little bit more to make it more accessible to everybody else, I think of health as one of those things that is a byproduct of doing the right things at the right times for the right reasons. And what I mean by that is eating health, like food that is rich in nutrition value, meaning that it's got lots of good, healthy, maybe not overly processed foods. It's not loaded with sugar or refined carbohydrates, so it doesn't affect our blood sugar levels negatively, which affects our energy and our moods, which also affects our output and our productivity, our ability to focus. So you can see how nutrition is a very important piece of the health that we all want, right? Because we can control the input. We choose what are we going to put in our body. And then if we look at what's happening outside of our body as a result of that, you can start to correlate. This is like the scientific method, right? We look at what goes in and we look at what comes out, and we can then adjust accordingly. So when I think about health, it's having that vitality whenever you want it, being resilient against any negatives that come your way, but also so you feel really grounded and connected to you, your life purpose, as well as your ability just to show up in the world. So you notice I'm not saying you have to be X amount of pounds or be able to do this fast of a 1 mile run. That's fitness metrics. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're a healthy individual. I've had friends that are competitive bodybuilders, like huge, massive dudes and girls, right? But I'll tell you right now, they're some of the most unhealthy people I know. They're not very healthy. And that's why it's very hard to sustain that kind of lifestyle for a long time. So you see, the extremes don't really fit into the healthy lifestyle in my definition of health. If you're in an extreme, well, it's going to affect something else negatively. Maybe your mental health negatively, right? So you might have great physical health. I see a lot of the men that I coach, they mask a lot of their emotions by going to the gym and trying to get big and strong, right? That they think that that's going to protect them. Meanwhile, they haven't dealt with some of the emotional mental health challenges that they've been facing. Instead, they just think, well, if I keep working out, it's just going to get better. It doesn't always work that way. It might make you feel better in the moment, but doesn't necessarily deal with the whole systemic idea of our whole life and our whole health. So that's just one way of doing it. And it may sound a little bit cryptic. I know I'm not giving you a fixed definition, but I want you to understand it really depends on who you are, what you're wanting to do, and then looking at the little things that allow you to be your best self, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that always boils down to what are your habits? The things that you do regularly influence that either positively or negatively.
Yeah, this is actually a really good definition of health. So most of the people who are actually who focus on health side, many actually goes on you need to have say 6 packs to be healthy. Or yeah, but this is actually a really subjective and really good definition, because health is always subjective to every single person. Yes,
that's right. Absolutely. It's very different, but we can try to generalize it, right? Like we know that if we exercise every day in a certain way, I'm not saying all exercises are equal, but you have to look at your ability. What can you do versus what you can't do? Just look at what you can. Like everybody can get out for a walk. Everybody can, now, of course, I recognize some people may not be fully able. Well, they can modify and do it in their own way. Find the activity that they can do. I have a friend who's a paraplegic and he does a lot of swimming. He also gets out there in his chair and he'll do like sprints in his chair. Like he's a very healthy and fit individual. He's not disabled, not in my eyes. He's very able. He's just modified how he exercises to allow him to still reap the reward and the benefit of a healthy, active lifestyle. So that's why I always let people know, just because, like, even myself, I live with a chronic autoimmune disease. It's there all the time. A lot of the symptoms never show up. And it's why doctors didn't diagnose me until about 7, 8 years ago, because they figure I've had it all my life. But because I was living a healthy, active lifestyle, a lot of the symptoms never showed up. I have a very advanced case of my condition. And I know people that have not anywhere near the severity of what I have, and yet their symptoms are far worse than mine. So this is just, again, to talk about the benefits of just doing the right things for the right reasons at the right time. It will often produce the right results. Doesn't mean that condition goes away. No, it's always there, but it rarely manifests itself. And the symptoms aren't as bad for me when they do show up because of the lifestyle that I lead. And I want people to think about that, really accept that, because what you do today and you do tomorrow and you do the day after, well, you are consistent. It will influence your future positively or negatively, but it depends on what you're doing right now.
Absolutely.
Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Cool.
Yeah. So basically, I don't have any knowledge in terms of what, let's say, like health issues that you have. So like I am not knowledgeable on that side.
Well, that's okay. I don't talk about it often. Excuse me, unless people ask me about it. But I like to let people know that, because it's like, yeah, I'm healthy and I'm active, but if you talk to a hematologist and you show them some of my profile as it relates to my immune system, I'm heavily compromised. And so you can imagine, going into the COVID year that we've had, my doctors were very apprehensive about me, having a bubble, like even having some close friends that maybe would be safe. They're like, it could be risky, because if I get the virus, it could affect me really negatively, because I have no defense system to really protect myself against this new strain. So, hey, teach their own. I just live my life as best I can, but I refuse to live in a bubble. I'm not going to live in a big bubble. I choose to live the life that I do.
Yeah, amazing. It's like you are actually an inspiration for many people, honestly. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It's just trying to be a role model, So, excuse me. Ooh, boy, choking here.
Yeah, that's okay. So how can people actually allocate their time for staying fit and healthy?
Well, I truly believe that anything is good. Like, anything is better than nothing. Okay. So I invite people, I'm like, start with just 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day of movement with purpose. And so I will qualify what that means in a second here. But this idea of 15 minutes a day, it's only 1% of your 24 hours. So every 24 hours, 15 minutes is 1%. That leaves you with 99 other percent that you can do whatever you want with. But 1% is a non-negotiable investment of time into your health. Now, people will ask me, is that all I got to do? No, but it's the minimum you deserve. You're worth at least that every day. And so when I say exercise with purpose, it's with the intention that you're going to elevate your heart rate to a level that might create a little bit of a sweat, a little bit of a huff and a puff, okay? Because that means we're elevating the heart rate, we're working the musculature, we're adding stress to the body, and realize, some stress is good stress, all right? Chronic stress, not so good. If it's every day, all stress, all day long, yikes, that's not healthy. It will affect us negatively. But when it comes to exercise, that is stress. We're putting the body under stress. But a little bit of stress is good because it creates adaptation. It forces us to evolve. If you look into Darwin's theory, right, on evolution, we'll see that stress was a key player that's affected the evolution of so many species. Either some species were very resilient and were able to adapt to the stresses in the environment, in their food systems, in nature. And those are the ones that are still around today. And then we have species that have gone away. Well, why? Well, they weren't able to adapt. So exercise is one of those forums to really help us adapt and get stronger and more resilient. We see our immune systems benefit. It increases our immune systems, our body's ability to defend itself by doing exercise. We also see some great mental health benefits, some cardiovascular benefits. So the case is 15 minutes a day is the minimum effective dose. All right. That's a good place to start. 1% of the day. Of course, what I always see happen with my clients, I'm like, commit to that for 28 days, 15 minutes a day, 28 days. And at the end of that, if you haven't seen massive shifts, come back and tell me. No one's ever come back to tell me. I've never had anybody say, no, I didn't have any positive benefits, because usually within a matter of days, we start to feel better. And when we start to feel better, we start to think and look at things differently. We start to choose different habits. Because when you're feeling good, the last thing that you want is to reach for something that might make you feel not so good anymore. So we start to even just change these little habits, right? Especially how we eat, how we talk to people, how we show up. So that's sort of what I invite people to start with. If you're struggling right now, just commit. No ifs, ands, or buts. 15 minutes a day to movement with purpose. Get the heart rate elevated, a little bit of a sweat. Good things will happen.
Okay, that's a really good place to start. 1% of the day. Yeah. Okay. So now, one thing that I also saw in your profile was, there's a thing called with Dad Body Project. So what is it?
Well, I'm a dad. I have 2 teenage daughters, and I was always of the mindset that I want to be healthy so I can be the best dad I can be. I want to be there to support my kids as best I can. And I know I need to be healthy to do that. And so my kids aren't an excuse, because I hear from some parents, it's like, I wish I could exercise more, but I have to look after my kids. And as soon as I hear that excuse, I'm like, you just made your kids the reason for you being unhealthy. Like, would you go and tell that to your son right now? Go tell him that you're out of shape, overweight, highly stressed, and it's all his fault. Would you go tell him that? The parents would never do that. But I'm like, that's what you're implying. So it's a matter of reframing how we look at our health. And so the Dad Body Project is a process, or a program, I should say, that I work with other fathers like myself, typically 35 and above, 35 years of age and above. And they're parents that want to get back to feeling good. And then once they get to feeling good, then it's like, how do we now get into feeling great? But getting to good is, for some people, the biggest first step. And that means creating new habits, because once they start to feel better, they start to act a little bit differently, and they show up for their families differently, usually in a much more engaged state, more present, more connected, more available. And so that's sort of what the Dad Body Project is. It was something that I kicked off a couple of years ago, as I had more and more men, especially fathers, reaching out to me for help and support based on the way I live my life. And I try to role model things. They were like, can you help us with this too? And I was like, of course I can. So I created a system around that to support them best and create positive results and adaptations. So that's what the Dad Body Project is. And I'm always around for conversations on that.
Okay. Really interesting project. Yeah, actually. So now, where do you see this project after 5 to 10 years?
Well, I've set up my life and my businesses that they adapt as I adapt. So as I change, my interests change. And often my business adapts to whatever my current interests are. So, over 10 years ago, I used to run a lot of free challenges and various ways of supporting community. And I still do that. But then as I started to dive deeper into different ways to support people and communities and different aspirations for my own life, I would start to pivot or maybe create or adapt some of my businesses to now fit into that. So I often think about, well, where do I want to be potentially 5 years from now? What's the lifestyle I want to be living? Who do I want to be around? And like for my wife and I, like travel is a very big deal, and we anticipate that within the next 5 years, we'll be spending 6 months outside of Vancouver, 6 months like abroad traveling, 6 months in Vancouver. And for that lifestyle to be, we have to set up our businesses in a certain way to complement that. So that's what I often think of. I always, when people are asking me, especially on the business side, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, it's like, well, what's the life you want to be living? What do you want to be doing every day? Who do you want to be connected with? How do you want to be feeling? How do you want to be showing up? Because think about that first and then reverse engineer backwards to figure out the best models to support that financially. So I don't think about, well, what job do I need to then create this lifestyle? Because unfortunately, that's prioritizing the job first. I want to prioritize lifestyle first and then find the best job or career or business that can support that. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does.
Because I can tell if you asked me that question 5 to 10 years ago, where I am today wouldn't even have been on the radar. Like I wouldn't even have mentioned this. Like what I'm doing today, I wouldn't even have been able to fathom that this is what I would be doing 5 years ago. That's how quickly things have changed in my life. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that right now. The world has changed. It's changed. And I think we're all adapting still and figuring things out. And that's okay. Living life is an act of creativity and discovery. We don't just stop. It just sort of happens as we live. But if we choose to live it in a certain way, it's amazing
what is this is a fundamental question that I always ask. This is what is learning and education to you?
Well, it's growth, right? It's growth and growing personally and professionally. Like it really depends what area I'm focusing on, but education ultimately gives us clarity. When we gain clarity, we improve our confidence in ourselves and our abilities in our decision-making process, trying to decide, oh, I could do this or I could do this. As we get so afraid of not picking the right one, we don't choose any. and so we can find ourselves getting stuck in these paths. And so education is wonderful at providing clarity, which provides confidence. And once you have the confidence, it's a lot easier to then action to make next. So for me, that's why education and learning is so important, because there's lots of times where I find myself like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what I should be working on. I don't know why I'm working on it, and that often involves needing some education. I know I need to learn a little bit more. I have to better understand something, because if I don't understand it, I'm not going to be able to move forward. So that's where education really fits into education is what you gain through going through that experience, and learning is the process of acquiring the education.
Really interesting definition. So any last words that you'd love to share with our audience?
Hey, listen, life is awesome. And if you choose to allow it to be awesome, it gets even better. And you know what? None of us have all the answers. And that was something that when I really accepted that, I realized that I can learn something from every single person I meet. There's always something I can learn from them. Everybody, we always have something that we can learn from another person. We all have value to offer. And sometimes it's just giving someone the attention or the time to be able to have that conversation. And from that conversation, taking that thing that you've learned, that shift it's made in your life or our life collectively, it's very powerful. It's how the world continues to evolve, but unless we're choosing to be active in our own life. And when I say active, I mean being active in all aspects, well, then you're living a life that's a little bit less of your potential. So live into your potential. Have fun with it. Realize there's going to be days that don't go the way you thought it was going to go. Oh, well, that's life. It's dynamic. It's always changing. It's what makes it exciting too. Doesn't mean you give up. You just keep doubling down, focus on the right things for the right time and the right reasons. And you know what? The right results will follow. And that's it. That's all I got.
Amazing, amazing. So where can our listeners find you online?
I'm pretty easy to find. I've got a really unique name, Dai, D-A-I, and then my last name is Manuel, M-A-N-U-E-L. And so if you look that up on any of the social media platforms, you'll see that I have my name as my handle. It was the cool thing about having a unique name that nobody else has. I was able to get it on all the social medias. But I am most active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So I usually invite people, if you're on those platforms, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. Just say, hey, how's it going? Because that's how everybody starts a conversation. It's a simple hello. And other than that, my website, daimanuel.com's got over 1,700 articles on it that I've been actively writing content now for 14, almost 15 years on that platform. And it's all geared to helping people live a better life. And like I say, everybody, I can open the door, but you got to walk through it. So if you're looking for some great resources, it's all free resources. It's just there to serve. Take some time, have some fun with it, go learn something, because back to the education and the learning, that is what allows us to evolve, to grow, to gain the clarity and the confidence that we're all looking for, so we can then take immediate action, which will impact our lives in a really good way. So there's the invitation. Reach out anytime. I'm around and accessible, and I look forward to having a conversation with one of you soon.
Yeah, sure. Amazing. So thanks for coming on the show. So like I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners learned a lot from it. And again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very, very much. And I love the work you're doing. Keep doing it. We all need this kind of guidance and support and just awareness. And I really am impressed that you're actively doing something about this. You're creating content that provides tremendous value. So I feel honored to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity, and looking forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, sure. Amazing. Thanks again for the listeners who are listening. And that's how we end. Bye to your listeners.